Tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou ngā kaimātaki I tēnei hōtaka o Kaupapa Rites of Passage. Tēnei mātou e mihi nei ki a koutou. Ko matariki ki te rangi, ko matariki ki te whenua, tēnei ka mihi atu ki a koutou katoa. Ai, tēnei rangi he pai anō kei mua I a tātou. Nā reira, ka mihia ki te katoa, kua tae mai ki te whakarongo. O tira te hunga tatahi anō ka piri mai ki a Kaupapa Rites of Passage tēnā koutou. O tira ki te manuhiri e noho tata nei ki a māua ko Tiaki tēnei rā, tēnei ka mihi atu. Tēnā koe Tiaki.
Tēnā koe Kiri, ka whakatūwhera I tēnei wānaka ki te karakia. Whakatāhatu rā te pō, whakatāhatu rā te ururi. Nunumi ka here o te pō, ka kāweke mai te ao, ka kāweke mai te mārama. Hihiri te rā, hihiri te kāpura ko riro I kaua nei e te kaua I raro o māhuika. E tāne e karawhiua mai rā te toki a Tahu akiraki. Kia tā kirikiri mai te ata hāpara. Pau te ao, pau te mārama, pau te ara whānui a tāne. I takea mai te weheka o raki e tū nei, o papa e taputo nei. Uhi, wero, tau mai te mārama. Haumi e, hui e, tāe. O tēnei au e mihi nei, e whakamoimiti nei, ki a koe e mane, kua whakawātea I a koe anō, tēnei te mihi ki a ngā puhi nui tonu, ki a koutou te whānau, kia whakai, kia hara mai tētahi tamaiti te rānei ki te kuhu, ki tēnei, tēnei webinaka, e aro ana ki te tohi. No reira tēnei te mihi ki a koe e mane ki tō pāhara keke, waihoki ki a koe e noho ana ki tērā wāhi rakatira, tērā wāhi roko nui a ihu matao. Tēnei mātou o Pautama e mihi nei ki au pukeka, ki au whanoka nui I roto I tēnei ao, tēnei haereka, mai te tamaiti taka tainua ki tēnei wā. Anō reira, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi. Mane, tēnā koe. Thank you, bro. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before I hand it over, I just wanted to acknowledge that you've had an epic journey in like on our kōrero advertising this webinaka. You've got a big background in the education and in the social sector, and you acknowledge that it was really the grounding with your grandfather. And I was thinking a lot about Maui and our story of Maui, and Maui washing up on the shore, and tama nui te rangi, tama nui o te rangi, Maui's grandfather nurturing him, looking after him in those first years. Anyways, that was just a kōrero that I was thinking about this morning, Mane. But if I may pass the rākau over to you, and with that question of what has been your experience and understanding of this kaupapa of tohi?
Ka te rā tēnā koe e te rangatira Tiaki nau hei puaringia tō tātou nei hui I runga I te arawhata ki tō tātou mato nui te rangi. Anō kia koe e te tuahine Kiri hei mihi ki te timatangia, hei wake ngia tō mātou nei papa. No reira tēnā kōra mō tēnei whakatau I ahau I tēnei wā. Hena Kau ke tātou e ware, hea te whenua nei e noho nei, ka te rā kei au ki te pāo taku hoaranga tira Ātihaunui Tahere, te whānau rāpata, rākena raini, ai ko ihu mātau te pā nei. Ki taku mōhio, ki taku whakapai ko ngā hapu o konei, ko te ahiwaru ko Ngāti Mahuta, ara te wai ohua, tainui, hena kau ke tātou ware. Ki muri nei a hau ko tō mātou nei awa o Ruarangi. Kei noho au māua tahi ko te whānau o taku huarangatira aina tō rātou papakainga hina e mihi kawa kena kia tātou e mataki nei. Tēnā koe Tiaki i moe taku tīmatanga urutanga i te kōrero e mihi kawa kena kia koe e pākau nei tēnei kaupapa te pautama ni. He kaupapa hohonu, he kaupapa kaha nei au i te mōhio o tukitanga o te kaupapa nei, te mea roa nei te wāhau e mahi tahi i te tāo mātou nei rangatahi. Hena kei te taitokero, anō hoki kei te waipaunamu. Mōhio au i te nuina o ngā taumaha i rungi a rātou i te wā tupu rātou i tēnei ao huruhuri. Hoina e mihi kawakena kia koutu mo tēnei kaupapa ki te hiki nei o mātou nei rangatahi, tāne raini. Nō reira, tēnā koutou. Ngā mihi o te wā kia tātou tēnei wā matariki tauhou. Ka tira, ko taku tēnei mea te tohi. As I mentioned, or as we mentioned before, Tiaki, my experience of tohi can only be one of, from where I'm from, that Ngāpuhi mātauranga, and I can only share what I have seen with my own eyes growing up under the shadow, aine anō te panikoti o taku krani pāpā Mane Tahere. And he's been quite a poignant figure in my life. He is my namesake grandfather, but has gone through so much because of this process, tohi. And when my mete Rawunia asked me about this kaupapa, it took me right back to him straight away because he's the only example I know of having gone through tohi. And there's some major questions around tohi that I don't think, well, when we peel the layers back to what tohi is, there's some really, there's some magic there, there's some lessons there, there's also some sacrificing, some consequence there as well. And I say this based upon the experience and stories gathered over time, watching and living and looking after my grandfather. And in particular, tohi. My grandfather went through te tohi atu. And te tohi atu matauinga. And it's quite a, for lack of a better word, process to go through. And through his telling of stories, we got to gather his mātauranga around what had happened in his life and the actual practical part of what went through, what he went through around that tohi atu. Now, tohi atu is, I think, there's lots of variations of tohi, but tohi atu, in my mind, is probably one of the more deeper around my limited mātauranga, what we do up north. Because I say that there's still lots I don't know and learn. So I think just to ground my kōrero, I just wanted to explain a few things or where I come from and where my points of views come from. I understand the world I live in at the moment. I'm quite intentional about what I share and how and what kaupapa I get into. And I just wanted to speak of it. There's a term or something that I've taken from the technology industry, actually. If you can imagine a graph, so down the bottom of the graph, you're measuring time. And then along the top axis, you're measuring the development of for this context, our rangatahi, and specifically I'd say our male rangatahi, the development saying 0 to however level of development. So if we look back at the measure or the line measure, and we can generally say at 1835 I go because of the whakaputanga, but also the treaty. 1835, the development of our male Māori rangatahi was quite high, was strengthened because pre-European. We were surrounded by our tikanga, by our pā, and all these really deep mātauranga that helped our tāne get through. And then we can generally say, if we measure it, it started to decline slowly with the erosion and the assimilation and colonisation. It just gradually declined, and I would say confidently we get to today, and we're not, definitely not. We've lost, we all know what we've lost. Now, if we come to 2020, purely from an aspirational perspective, we want to grow through initiatives like Potama and some awesome work out there amongst our community, the aspirational development of our tāne rangatahi. We want that to go up. So we can see the measurement gradually going up, and say for the next 50 years, we want it to be up there. We want it actually to be higher than where it was at 1835. Now, how do we get there? We can see this, if we look at the measure line, it'll gradually go up. I put my mentality in what's called the bridge of exponentiality. So instead of going for that slow, gradual climb, we want to bridge from there straight to that development point. And so that's what I call the bridge of exponentiality. Now, what do we have to do to go straight there? What do I have to do in my sphere of influence? And what are the projects Māoridom have to get into and really think if we want to build that bridge to exponentially grow our people and our tāne and our rangatahi? So I look backwards, and I come backwards and I say, you know, what do I do? What projects do I get into? And sometimes it can be trialing, and that's where I think that's where I place myself. I get myself involved in a whole lot of stuff that the intention is to bridge and go straight there, and we get there sooner and faster. We're behind in a lot of things, and I mean we can go through that all day. But that's where I come from my ngākau. And I say that because that's going to cover me throughout this kōrero, particularly around tohi atu. Now, I don't know, like some iwi and hapu, it's not always supported that we share some of our deep knowledge and our deep mātauranga around tikanga and around kawa and around what we do in our processes. But I'm an advocate. I know that some of our rangatahi learn in different ways. And so I'm all for testing that we should share some of this so that we can later on or somehow contextualise that old tikanga to a contemporary kind of framework or whatever have you. So, I had to say that because even up home I do challenge the status quo on the taumata and with some of our whaia queer, and it really is, it's that development. How do we exponentially grow that? We have to, you know, keep on it. The rubber meets the road and keep on going. So in saying that, sharing the stuff that my grandfather had, during his life that we had learnt and the stories he had told us is a real deep ngāpuhutanga, and that's all I can share. So he went through tohi atu, and as a baby, he, not as soon as he was born, but soon after, we have a puna on our whenua. And as a baby, these pepi were put into the puna to see whether or not they were worthy of the mana and the mauri or the ringakaha of Ngāpuhi. And so that's, and I just wanted to make note there, with tohi and with the pepi going in there, that's an example of a choiceless tohi. That person going through the tohi or that pepi had no choice at the time. And so that's poignant because when we look at contextualising that into some future examples, do we look at choiceless kinds of tohi for our rangatahi? But we can peel that back too. So during that process, his kaumātua they put him into the puna, and if the baby was to return, they were worthy to hold that mana. And that's just, you're talking about a real ngāpuhitanga here in I taua wai tino pakanga rātou. Anō hoki koina te mea o te kōrero e ai ki te kōrero o Ngāpui kōwhaorau. In Ngāpui, there are 100 holes or 100 puna and ana. And you can go throughout the landscape of Ngāpuhi, and it was says that those were the highways of our taniwha, of our tuakaha, or our tareha, tureha, however, whatever name there is out there. So around Ngāpuhi, you'll see these puna, and so if the pepe, the taniwha took a liking to that pepe, they would return, and from that point on, that was the specific tuhi that my grandfather went through, and he often spoke about that. And throughout his lifetime, we can see the what that set him up for throughout the hapu, and so that particular tuhia too was quite a it is talked about in our hapu, but it's happened every generation since our tupuna kaharau. And so many whānau in Ngāpuhi would have gone through this. To my knowledge, he was the last one in our family who this had happened to. The unfortunate thing with my grandfather is, in any other era, it would have been considered normal. Unfortunately, during the 60s, 70s, 80s is the height of some of the colonisation and assimilated policies, and he was marginalised and victimised for actually practising what was otherwise normal amongst our hapu and our marae. So he had a hard life. He had a really, really hard life, and that's why I think the things I do is to really support some of the things he couldn't do. But he was an interesting man. I was his tono at times, so I used to look after him, especially in his later years. And he just lived his life under Kaupapa Māori, tikanga Māori. And so there's those who know Mane Tahere would know some of the challenges he had in his life. He was, for example, locked up for 30 years of his life, considered mentally unstable. And I've done a lot of research and gone back and through the archives and obtained files and documents and state care abuse stuff around when he went into the mental institutions. Some of the doctors were saying this man is fine, he's not mentally unstable, he's got this mātauranga, but there were reasons why he was in there. He was one of our Northland's largest shareholders or landholders in Māori whenua, and at the time Māori Affairs could class him as insane and then make decisions on his behalf around the whenua. So he just went through all sorts of stuff like that, and as a youngster growing up, we just listened and heard the stories. And I mean, he used to say, they're not going to use me as a pincushion anymore. You know, so it's a real sad story. But the tohi that he went through, sort of, that's what makes me think around this is purely a traditional perspective, some of the consequences that entailed, and some of the sacrifices. Obviously, during that process when they put him into the puna, something happens to the pepe, and the pepe, tētahi māramatanga e pāmai kia mātou, koina te mea ka whātua ngia nā kanohi o te pepe. And this is where just one understanding, or our understanding of where Ngāti Whātua get their name. Whātua ngia, kua whawha ki tō kanohi kia kite ki tua. Whātua. And it was when the pepe went down into kōwhaurau, the 100 holes of Ngāpuhi, their eyes would switch or change, and they can therefore see ki tua. And koina te kōrero e pāmai te tupuna poko kia mātou nei, anō hoki kia tāhere, tino hohonu tēnei kōrero. But why I share it is because if we take some of that and contextualise it today, there is, and know exactly some of the parameters that tohi provides, knowing some of the consequence and sacrifice ultimately goes through that process, and you come out not rewarded but ordained, or something similar to hold the mantle, whether it's the ringakaha of Ngāpuhi or the tribe, or something similar in today's world. But it's when we do contextualise it being intentional around what is a modern day tohi, and I think there's lots actually. There's lots that can be considered a modern day tohi. If I look at some of our the way I was brought up in, it's well known that Ngāpuhi tamariki are some of the most transient tamariki throughout the motu, for whatever reasons. They move around lots and stay with different whānau in town to town. And so some of the challenges that comes with that, and I've experienced it too growing up, is can be considered tohi in itself. Because when I look back on it now, you know, whether you didn't have kai, whether you had to hitchhike or find your way somewhere home, all these different challenges that some of our rangatahi face, whether it's going through the foster care system, I think those can be considered a type of tohi too. But, you know, it's about us, I think, gathering our thoughts and our mātauranga into centralising it and actually saying this is the tohi, that, you know, and knowing everything about a modern day tohi. But koina tangu whakaro te wānei, ni ahu mai tērā whakaro mai te mātauranga o taku krani pāpā. There's just, I look at also another aspect of tohi was how long is the tohi process? How long can the tohi process take? And I asked that because I often thought, and I was thinking more and more over the last couple of days, actually my grandfather's whole life was tohi. It was a stepping stone into the next tērā tahu te āraipio. And I think I say that because, and I share happily and openly, at the time, te wāe mate ai ia, he simply laid down and i mahi ai ia taua meo te kranga aitua, and says, you guys have a good life. We were there, and I will see you in the next stage. And I kranga aitua e ia. Ka mate, ka tai te mate I runga iaia. So I think about, you know, and if I unpeel some of that, is, you know, he obviously knew where he was going. He knew what stage he was at. It was his time to go. There was no fear or anything of the like. He just simply laid down and ka mate ia. And so many, I mean, he accumulated lots of experiences over his life, and I think of some of the sacrifices, whether it was being locked up or incarcerated, or some of the challenges through colonisation. Even our whānau, some of our whānau didn't understand him, and the way he would, obviously when you have the skill and ability gone through that tohi as a baby, you're more spiritually inclined, and you're more in touch with those things, and you have that mātauranga, and through his upbringing he was taken into those ngāpuhi wānanga, and given the whakapapa and all the kōrero as well. So but when even some of his own whānau were assimilated to different ways of Pākehā, that was victimizing and marginalizing for him as well. So it was just his closest whānau knew what his abilities, and what he used to say he was a taniwha slayer or fighter, and you could see it every minute, every second minute, hour of the day. He was karakia. And so, that's all I can sort of share in my experience around observing that over my young ages, and being his more being his tono and all hours of the night, and making cup of tea and do this, and this is why you don't do this, or don't go into that room. Kei reira he taniwha. And so, you know, it was a really, I think for myself, it was a tear between two worlds, because I'd still go back to school, and I remember being called into the principal's office for sharing a story about how babies are born. And I mean, the story he told me was I thought was just natural, but it wasn't. And so you get in trouble for sharing what your grandfather just told you, and then you start to fear that, and oh well, I'm not going to share anything more. And that's as a young kid. So yeah, I mean, koina, that's sort of an experience with tohi atu, within our whānau.
Ngā mihi nunui ki a koe o tira ki tō kraiwa. Yeah, kua tuarihia mai I ngā kōrero ki a mātou, he honore nei. So for yourself, because you know you're wearing his name too, ne? What are the expectations that the iwi or the hapu or the hapori have with yourself or your whānau, your karangatahi, and that with he lived tohi life? You know, is any of those expectations put upon any of you?
I think to a degree it's a little, I guess growing up there was always something there, whether it was around whenua or whether it was around wairuatanga, and not necessarily with my own whānau, it was with my mother's whānau as well, who obviously had a view on how he did things. And I think there was always that awareness that something you were almost treated a little different, not too much, but as well as knowing that with those times I was always with him and being his tono. I mean, I obviously couldn't go out and play with my siblings and cousins, and you had to stew the apples or do some really hard yards with him, and listen to his stories as well. And I think that's probably one expectation within my whānau is sometimes you get a knock on the door and they ask about what did Grandpa say about this, and what was that story again, or you know, what did he used to do in this at this time, or with these people, or that hapu, or that marae. And I sometimes I do have to rack my brain on, shucks, what did he say? And it's about, because at the time you just really want to go and play. But there is a bit of mātauranga that I still retain, and some bits and pieces like today I'm pleased to share, but some bits I just know you don't share, and so unless it's with your own kin, and it's in this particular setting in a particular way. And so there's that expectation, I think, sometimes, I guess, being more active in the marae back up home. Yeah, there's also people, you've got to remember, when you have the ringakaha or the strong hand, the hapu, not everybody's your friend, or you have to actually make some hard decisions. And so I often find myself as a trustee amongst these intergenerational differences with each families, with the whānaus or the hapu, and you have to actually really look at it and peel back the layers why they feel that way, and why you can't make a decision in the committee because one particular whānau don't agree with it. So there's some of that there that's still around, but he did things intentionally. So you know, yeah, I think a lot of people still remember some of the things, but they question why he used to do it. It wouldn't be unless you're his immediate family that you would know. You know, I rangatira ia ana whakaro. So he was always thinking like that, rangatira.
Tēnā koe e te rakatira. ko kaha kōrero nei koe mo te taha ruataka o tēnei ao, ne, mo te taha wairua me te taha kiko, mo tēnei taha Māori me te taha Pākehā, ka ao e rua, me te weheka nui, ki waika nui e nei ao e rua. Ewe he hohonu tēnei kōrero. I was just going back to what you were saying about the modern day tohi, and you're talking about the chosen versus the imposed tohi, and as well as that kind of the community led versus the self-led or peer-led. You know, finding yourself hungry and homeless, and that becoming a tohi in its own form, because there are those elements of tohi. Whereas if it was potentially a community-led journey where you don't have to suffer these hardships because they are imposed, more so because it's a choice that you're saying, he mahi rakatira tēnei, he wero nui, he wero rakatira tēnei. I was just reflecting on that's the kaupapa of Pautama, and how we are returning to that community, the community-led approach, where we are. It's not so much totally. It's not all chosen. However, it's a community choosing, and it's saying it's your time, boy. You know, it's your time, girl, and come with us, and let's go on an adventure. I was also just thinking about what you said, that bridge to can you say that word again?
Exponentiality.
And was thinking again, reminded of what it was like 5-6 years ago when there was maybe a group of us youth and community workers going, how do we make that difference? You know, how do we make that difference we want to see in our work, in our mahi with rakatahi? Because we've been involved in a lot and we're not quite seeing that. You know, it's almost like that missing magic ingredient. And that was what led us to tohi. And everything that you've talked about is like this, there's this te taha ruataka, te wairuataka, me te kikotaka, me te honoka, the joining of these two worlds, and in that place is this magic, the mauri, if you will, even the wairua.
I guess exactly, and more recently, holding a position for Upper South Island around Oranga Tamariki. I know we all know the challenges going on with Oranga Tamariki, but being an executive manager of that region, at Matua Kōkiri, in charge of all the Māori and Kaupapa Māori initiatives, which was that very aspiration around community-led stuff for our tamariki, iwi hapu whānau-led stuff and change in legislation. And that space can be quite powerful, and my mahi there was about the co-creation space. If I look at the macro view to Oranga Tamariki, and I'm no longer working for them, I'm a few weeks out of there, and it's safe to say that that organisation doesn't fit our tamariki. And so in all my experience and all my time there sitting at tier 3 of the organisation, which is 2 away from the CEO, I came to that understanding. Whether it was some of my upbringing and knowing how the depth to te ao Māori and knowing that the where they fall short, my sort of coming out of that space is that actually it's not an organisation for our Māori, let alone some of our other moana nui, kiwa whānau, and others. But if I go into some of the work we were doing there, and which highlights the power of being intentional, and you can be intentional around the tohi, like you've done, and like you say, along the 4 years, some of the projects and mahi you do. I think for me it was trying to implement, at the time it's not tohi, but in retrospect now I think it is actually a form of tohi, but the co-creation with whānau hapu iwi was key for me. And it was about being intentional. What and I was really strong on taking, obviously because of my background with my grandfather and whānau, taking wairuatanga into that space. You know, you can get orders to take children. That's a legal process. But throughout that process, there's nothing at all that covers wairuatanga. And so it was being intentional in taking that space, taking that kaupapa Māori stuff in there. And who's best to lead that? And that's our community. That's our community as Māori, who, as we know it, whānau hapu iwi, those constructs are there. And so it was trying to bridge that gap with the organisation into that. And there was one particular project, Kaupapa Māori care homes, we were opening 3 of them in the South Island, top of the South Island, and so we had to go through a systematic change of the way we do things and the way we did things. That was a challenge in itself, mainly because when you're trying to change a system or process that comes from the Western point of view, doesn't adopt mātauranga Māori at all, but also the people implementing that from grassroots level, social work level, right up to where I was, majority of them are non-Māori. And so you couldn't possibly expect them to know the depth of mātauranga Māori and implementing that within. So it was always to say to them and try and get them to come along and say, it's going to be whānau hapu. It's going to be hapu that are going to lead that because they know, they understand the depth. It's their tamariki. But again, that's the challenge that organisation, and whakapapa's key in that organisation. There's poor te atatu that the report that happened 30 years ago that said that's exactly what we should be doing. We have only just adopted that recently, or OT, and through the legislation of 7AA, and that's not adopting that wholeheartedly. That's just a bit of what that report suggested. And that report, the creators of that report went to every marae around the motu to understand and get the wants of what the iwi and hapu, how they want to deal with their tamariki. So I mean that was an example now that I look at it of being intentional, taking wairuatanga in that process. When Māori tamariki go into a care home, having kaitiaki there, doing karakia, because it is traumatizing, and we need to korowaitia kia rātou I roto I te aroha I te manaki, and we can only, I felt and still feel that needs to be done in an intrinsically Māori way and by Māori for Māori. So those homes are still being set up because initially it was all signed off, but the challenges are at the different working levels, operational levels, where you just, that depth to Māoridom is not there. And that's why I can say macro view, our whānau should be hapu and Māori should be doing it. And there is a bit of work going on to develop that. But again, how do we exponentially grow that? How do we get that? Every day we wait is a tamariki that's put into a position that's traumatizing. So with tohi, I see that when we contextualize that, we can implement some of, with all of them, the traditional stuff. We understand a bit more the sacrifice, the consequence, but then how do we take and move forward some of the good stuff from their traditional? How do we contextualize it into 2020 up to 2080? What is it going to look like? Knowing that if that becomes a new tikanga of tohi, it takes a few generations to implement, and then it becomes as what we know the old tohi is. So, koina taku whakaro in Naine, but those are some of the challenges that we face as a practitioner in different spaces. Yeah.
Mane, I think about this. Sometimes I think it's like he tauka tuku iho tēnei kaupapa ni, he tauka tuku iho. He tapu tō te tauka tuku iho. He mana anō tō te tauka tuku iho. And I've felt in this journey that it's like it's too tapu. It's too ancient. It's too old. It's too buried. It's, all these all these sort of barriers to us returning to some of these old practices. But there are people like yourself, recently Dr. Ngahuia Murphy as well, and she's just put forward a new research proposal and asked us to write a letter of support. And in that is that thing, we need these people like Dr. Ngahuia Murphy, yourself, who carry this whakapapa, and others, to be talking about this stuff, to uncover that it's not too hard, it's not too tapu, it's not fufu, you know. And I guess I just want to honour you and your grandfather as well, that he uaua tana ao, ne, he uaua tana oraka, i roto i tēnei ao, pēhi nei, pēhi te ao Māori nei, because there's some hidden gems in what your grandfather and now that you carry that we need to now bring out, and that's that bridge to exponentiality.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it's not an easy journey when you're talking about tikanga and adaptation or evolution or enhancement of tikanga. I know that through some of my own journey on my own marae amongst our ngāpui hapu, Ngāti Tautahi, and they are one of the oldest hapu in Ngāpuhi, and that's where that really deep Ngāpuhi-tanga comes from. And so when you're up against that as a taiohi or a tamaiti, I say, amongst them, that's not always easy. So you do take 3 steps forward and 5 steps back at time, but it's that exponentiality, knowing where you're going and what's at stake. And I think it's because, like yourself and many others, we see that frontline stuff that happens with our rangatahi and with our males, all of our Māori whānau, and you just compelled to keep grinding, keep going, knowing that you know, you're gradually growing that sphere and your own sphere of influence. I mean, I do there is some really doing pastoral care for our tamariki and up in Taitokero, taking care of the homely needs of our students that were in kaikohe there for 5 or 6 years. You just can see the ones that have fallen through the gap, and we can often talk up here around policy and all this great initiative, but it often doesn't filter down. I mean, in lots of instances it does, but I generalise, you know, it doesn't. And for isolated places like the Hokianga, you can just see the taimaha, the pauri on our tamariki, and it just drives you to make that change. Even within, you'll be surprised at how many tamariki within my own hapu and area don't know their whakapapa. And so you're talking about, you know, there is a strong line or mātauranga in Ngāpui, but there are ones disconnected who are falling through the gaps. So yeah, I mean, I have, very sad to say, 2 brothers incarcerated in Ngāwha, and there's a whole story behind Ngāwha that we all know around the tapuness there, and so it's we have to fight, we have to keep on doing this mahi. And I guess, I mean, if I look at the projects I'm involved in now, there's about 6 or 7. My thinking is, out of those 6 or 7 projects, one of them's got to come through and succeed or make some sort of change and influence. So it's just grounding, knowing your place, and I think you know, ringa raupa, ringa paru ngia o ringa, get them dirty and keep mahi, you know. But often being in that executive space, even in government in Wellington, you just too much talk. And there's great people in the organisations, great Māori in there doing great stuff. But I just see that gap. And so if we can create and contextualise things like tohi, even pure, some examples of pure from home, you know, they just fit. And I mean, I hear what you're saying around tapu, because, gosh, everything up north is tapu. But we laugh about it in our own whānau, and even my grandfather had examples of, you know, he would laugh about his role, and he often laughed about, I mean, getting into a fight with the constable of Police 10-7, the old constable, I've forgotten his name, but that was because he blocked his trailer, his tractor from getting in the whenua, and they got into a scuffle. But, you know, that's a funny example. I mean, not condoning anything, but it's an example, because the way he explained it, of how he laughed about fighting for your mana motuhake. You can, and it's up to us, again, being that really intentional about what do we take through, and what do we do we let some of that other stuff rest. Say in 50 years, that stuff would be hopefully still around in knowledge, but what we've set up would be normalised. Well,
I'm going to go. Mane, what is the state of our whānau, our hapu, our iwi? What is the state of our tamariki? That's what I'm getting to. And what, you know, your understanding of tohi, what can you see, and maybe that curve, what can you see tohi changing in terms of that bridge?
I guess when I look at the state of our tamariki, and just being in the space of oranga tamariki, it doesn't look great. Often you can't disclose any information at all when you're inside, but the stuff that is publicly known are the numbers around, and the makeup of Māori in the system. Those are just numbers, say whether it's 4,000, 7,000. It paints a picture, a macro picture of where it is. But when you're on the inside and you can see some of the level of detail to, you know, that's 4,000 children Māori. It's just the detail of one of those tamariki is taumaha, is really thing. So it leads me to say, but not to rule out, but it leads me to say that it's not a good state. I think we all know that, especially around that taking of our tamariki. But there are, I mean, don't get me wrong, like in Kaikoura, there are lots and lots of good mahi going on that don't often get acknowledged. But I would say we still got a long way to go, and so the state isn't, and there's always room to improve on the state of our whānau and hapu. And I think using tohi, I mean, off the top of my head, when I look at bridging that gap, and I think it was Dr. Ngata talking about education as a type of tohi, and a Western sort of view on it, and you go through bachelors and masters and so forth. You know, can we contextualise that to our ancient wānanga and say that for Ngāpuhi, if we were to take them through to the wānanga sites and walk them through that whakapapa and, you know, lights out Ātihaunui, kōrero, waiata, and doing those really practical things, especially for our tāne, our male tamariki, not written, not and then layering the wairuatanga to that. Like this morning up at Te Ipu Matoho Mangere Mountain, it's another thing to feel it. Just standing there in the silence looking at matariki and talking them through that stage, and what are you feeling, because it's the simplest things that they don't realise as well. Often we will talk, this is why you do it, or it's forceful, it's sort of drummed into them, but getting them through, taking them through a process where, whether that's considered tohi. It's been purposeful and intentional around, we might end up with, do we be intentional and say we have 100 tohi in 2021? That our rangatahi, our pakeke, all sorts go through. It's up to what we want to make it, I think. Looking at the benefits of going through that, and the crux of what tohi is. You know, you go through a process to get a recognition or some level up in some sense. So I mean, the world, when you look at it like that, the world's your oyster around layering that traditional with the contemporary, contextualizing it. And I mean, we could probably let's have a wānanga for 5 more of these, you know, and draw something up. But it is, I think, one crucial part is it has to be that co-creation with whānau hapu iwi, whatever that looks like.
I was thinking we've got, you know, I don't know if it's more relevant than ever, particularly at this time after this period of lockdown. And yeah, I've like in the last couple of wānaka, webinaka, we've been talking Kiri about our nefs, and I've gone through particularly those 16, 17-year-olds in our whānau, or our adolescent boys and girls, have gone through a really tough time. Do you notice anything about that shift around adolescence? Is there anything there, maybe even from your own experience around tohi and what you could understand could be supporting our teenagers at this time?
Yeah, I think for sure there's a lot going on around that adolescence and the transition over to pakeketanga, say. Puberty even in itself is huge. What does that do to a male? And I do think we can't get into this blanket fit all sort of with our rangatahi, and that's where the co-creation, that's where the individualisation with the people of the land, the ahika, the mana whenua in different areas come into it. It might mean something different to whether we do that way up north, and then to here in Iwamātao, it has to be, we get too stuck in that blanket fit all, and that's just the way the government funds as well. You know, here's putia for roll it out nationally, when actually our normal natural constructs are not like that. Ia maraia, ia hapu te tikanga. And so I think, when I was growing up, actually all of my cousins, we went through fighting with our parents, fighting with our fathers, and we went through running away, homelessness. I mean, we laugh about it now. It's we've all been through it, but that's pretty huge when you think about it. And but that's sort of, no one was there at the time. Whether you're hitchhiking down the Brendurans with one of your other cousins, and he gets a ride and jumps in, and then you're too slow, and you meet in whangarei or what have you. Those are all, if we were to have a process or tohi to guide someone through that, and I guess even to support, have the resource, have the ability to provide service or provide the materialistic things to back up the tohi, would be quite key from that adolescence through to, it's quite sad. I think of a lot of whānau who have fallen through and ended up on a different track because they didn't have that. There was no support. I must say, like you've heard, it was, whether it was direct or indirect, knowing a lot of stuff that my grandfather had growing up with him and his stories, that's what kept me going through some of those transient times as an apui rangatahi. So that was enough. Is that enough? But then it begs the question too, how long is tohi? How long is the process? We can say like some tohi are practical and will happen over an hour or 2 or 5 hours a day, a wānanga, but in the context of my grandfather, I think tohi was a lifetime for him, because he constantly did, he got the ringakaha, and then throughout his life he did a whole lot of stuff to back that up, and then when he had finished, it's a lifetime of tohi. And so is it just the adolescence time that we need to, or do we contextualize and look at stages to a lifetime, or stages to a I mean there's lots if we were to really wānanga, but I can only think when I wānanga at home, and knowing some of the examples and some of the stuff that goes on at home up in Kaikohe, definitely throw out some of the Western, whether it's youth court or Western constructs that guide our people, and replace it with something like the marae. Let the kaumātua guide them through, do we call that tohi? So, yeah.
That's awesome. Whakarongo ki ngā kōrero, and ko ngā wāhanga e kia nei ko te arapautama. The human development stages, mai te pīpitanga i te kaumātua ki tua i tina. And I think this is where we're at now, is we want to be providing opportunities and tools for our rangatahi and inpakiki that haven't experienced anything like this, where they know how to unpack some of the processes that are stopping them from developing. And this is, you know, when we get together in wānanga and kōrero and share that. And today we have heard so many rich kōrero about ngā puhi mūtonu. And I think we're very lucky to have heard that. And, you know, sharing your experience, your cousins, like, there's only so many things you can learn from your cousins, right? That you can't learn from your siblings. There's only some things that you can learn from your siblings that you can't learn from your cousins. You get the kōrero from your auntie and uncles that you aren't going to get from your mum and dad. Like, those are rites of passage too. So here we are talking about traditional practices, and then coming into the modern day, and how can we still tō mai I ēnā āhuatanga, looking after the Māori practices onehe, and adapting them where they feel safe, that they can still use them today. Yeah. So he mihi nui tēnei kia koutou, kia ngā puhi nui tonu. It's just amazing. I mean, I'm a mummy of teenagers, and, you know, they think their mum hasn't been a teenager, so I don't understand what's going on in their life. So these are called kōrero that have been shared today with everybody here. E mihi ana kia koe.
Kia ora.
He rangatira ngā kōrero, o tira te whenua kei muri a koe, kua kaha mātaki te ao. Ia koutou, o tira tangi mō tia nei, te nuinga o Aotearoa, ngai Māori, nā te mea kua pāti nei momo ki te nuinga o ngā tōpito katoa ko tātou nei motu. Nā reira, tēnei ka mihi atu.
Ka tautoko katoa au I ka mihi kua mihia ki a koe e mane. Kāre he kupu hei whakatepe I tēnei kōrero māhaku, kei kua whākai koe I a hau I tēnei rā, waihoki kāre kore I te toko maha, ka kitea tēnei webinaka, no reira tēnei te mihi ki a koe e mane.